Hello, and welcome to AWS This Is My Offer, where we spotlight innovative AWS partner solutions. I'm your host, Gautam Kher, and today I'm excited to be joined by Arun Subramaniyan, the CEO of Articulate AI. Arun, thanks for being here.
Hey Gautam, thank you so much for having me, and thanks for the opportunity.
So, as we get started here, Arun, love to understand a little bit more about Articulate. If you could share kind of at a high level an overview, that'd be great. And then before you dive deeper, we'd like to go kind of understand the verticals you focus on, kinds of problems you're solving, etc.
Great. Well, that's a lot of questions bundled into one. So I'll give an introduction. So Articulate is a domain-specific GenAI platform that is focused on solving some of the most complex problems for highly regulated industries and industries that and domains that have a very high barrier to entry because you need to have years of training in that particular domain to be able to solve problems in that domain. Right? That's at a very high meta level what we do. We are a product company. We build platforms from the infrastructure layer all the way up to the application layer. And some of the key features of what we're trying to build are that we build everything in house, meaning all of the models we deploy, both general purpose models and domain specific models, are everything that we've built and researched and developed in house. And all of the decision layer that is required to be deploying these capabilities at runtime are also built in house. Like that's really the core of the IP that we built. But in order to deploy it efficiently and at scale, into domains that are complex, we actually had to optimize everything at the infrastructure level all the way up to the application level, right? And just a little bit about the team. We are a group of experts who understand cloud very deeply. Some of us come from our experiences out of AWS, but other clouds as well. But we've been high performance computing people for pretty much all our careers, doing large scale computing, whether it's a simulation or a large scale AI workload, right? And that experience is really what got us into getting into these kinds of applications, where we were part of some of the earliest teams building the largest models, there are transformer based models when we were in Amazon. And then we ended up scaling it for other companies as well outside. And today, that experience is really what we bring to bear in developing what we call domain specific models. And there is a general misconception about domain specific models just being small models, right? And for us, domain specific models are models that support domains based on the data sets that are available in that particular domain, right? So I'll give you an example. You asked for which domains we work on. Predominantly, we work on large scale industrial domains. Think of manufacturing, semiconductors, aerospace, automotive, energy, oil and gas. But we also do very large scale B2B financial services. As disjointed as those two worlds might seem, but the technological challenges are more or less the same, which is you have a combination of highly structured data, highly structured piece of information, combine that with extremely large volumes of unstructured data. How do you mix those two things together to analyze and synthesize information? That's really what we do really well, because the reason why I'm using the word analyze and synthesize is if you have the answer to your question, whatever that might be, exactly available in your corpus of data, there are any number of different tools that will help you go build that or fetch that. What we do really well is when the answer to the question or the problem that you're looking for requires a synthesis of the data and information you have, it's not something that is directly fetchable. And so for that, you need a set of tools, you need a set of agents today. And we've been building what we call an agent of agent system, which reasons at runtime to go solve problems like that. And I'll pause here to see if you have any other questions, but there are some typical use cases that we go after that are typical to us, but might be completely atypical to the Gen AI world.
Yeah, well, you took the words out of my mouth, Arun. So first of all, love the breadth and depth of what you built. It's incredibly impressive. The fact that you are taking these complex problems and providing an elegant solution to the enterprise, I think is um, incredibly differentiated as far as we see in the marketplace. So hats off to you and the team. Incredible. I think the one of the areas that we would like to understand is maybe you could unpack one specific use case, maybe in, as you mentioned, this disjointed world. Maybe
Yes.
take one aspect of the continuum and Maybe dive
Yeah.
a little deeper and share with us kind of the use case to illustrate, one, the customer problem, right, that you're solving, and two, the value that you all are unlocking, that's making these deployments so successful.
Absolutely, right. So take the prototypical use case for us is an expert assistant. And the reason why I'm saying those two words is it's not assistants are dime a dozen today. The co-pilots are dime a dozen. Everybody has two or three or maybe 10. But an expert assistant is somebody who actually has to raise to the bar of an expert and assist with specificity that is required of an expert, right? So those two things are very important. And like I'll give you two examples, in one in the manufacturing world, another in say the financial services world, but you'd see the similarities very quickly. In the manufacturing world, we are deployed inside say an air gap facility inside a semiconductor manufacturer, but it's the same irrespective of which manufacturing facility you're in, where there is $100 million plus piece of equipment that spits out logs every second. So you get like hundreds of logs that's coming out. You have manuals that are associated with that. You have reports that are being written on what happened in that particular facility. And you have volumes of information about what's going on around the facility, meaning how much is the inflow, what is the expected production rates, what's the weather, lots of information that an expert technician has to figure out what they're seeing in the data that is coming out. Is that a fault? Is that going to become a big fault, or is that something that they can choose to ignore? These are decisions that they have to make many times a day, right?
Hmm.
And the worst of those kinds of problems they'll catch anyway because there are rules to catch that. That's not a problem. The problem is finding things that are early indicators, and finding things that are early indicators that are not false positives. False positives are at least okay, it's okay, you can go figure that out. False negatives are worse because then you shut down the line, right? So
Yeah.
those two things are really where they're looking for help. And it's almost a finding a needle in a haystack problem because you are trying to find early signals without causing too many false positives and certainly not missing anything, which means you find and you reason about them. So you say, okay, this looks like a fault. Have you seen it anywhere before? If you saw
Mhm.
it before, what was it most likely caused by? And if it was caused by something, is the same kind of situations occurring now? All of these questions that are nuanced would go through the analyst's mind when they're just even looking at the data. But our system actually does that very systematically. When it goes and
Hmm.
analyzes, does the overall system, comes out with when it actually flags something as a fault, you already know all of these things have been done. And when the expert goes in and looks at it, they don't have to ask a question. The question has been asked and answered. So it's all there for them. Of course, that doesn't mean we have 100% detectability, but then it is something that an expert can rely on and continue to train. Right? That's one set of use case. Now transport yourself to the financial services world, and where a large, say, B2B financial services player is making a bet on moving a several $billion of investment one side or the other. So there is an
Yes.
investment thesis that is written, and it's not the first time they're doing it. They have many other investment theses that were written. They're trying to do a red team or a blue team, and then they're trying to figure out, okay, what is the analyst track record? What are they
Mhm.
seeing? Like in the financial world, it's interesting because everybody sees the same data. Like the data is public, everybody sees the same data. It's a synthesis that is different from one firm to
Mhm.
another. So they're looking at their own synthesis and saying, okay, I can see some signals. This is what I'm predicting. Now, what the system does is, okay, now go look at all of the other reports that have been written, not just by this analyst, every other analyst out there. What are they all saying? Are they all seeing something or are they all missing something? Is this
Yeah.
something that is standing out or is this pretty much saying the same thing as a consensus view? And it does something even more. It predicts what happened last time and what was the track record of what did you say versus what actually happened, which is itself a hard exercise to go do. But all of those things are run in parallel, and it's really multiple agents if you think about it running in parallel coming out with final answer. But when an analyst looks at it, the questions that they have in their mind are really what are asked and answered. And it's a slightly different paradigm because chatbots, like somebody I think had just a recent Forbes article, like chatbots are the lowest table stakes these days, but it's always been, because if you have to ask a question, you're already spending time. What I want an assistant to do is ask most of the questions I would have asked and answer it.
Right.
And then I can go do the value add at the last minute, right? It's not just AI slop, it's actually saying do deep analysis. That's really what we do.
Got it. Could you share a little bit about how the teams at these customers are
Yes.
kind of justifying the investment, both, of course, the licensing costs and so on, but more importantly, the change costs, if you will, right, to
Yes.
change their day-to-day workflow, right? Because if you're a investment analyst, I would presume when you talk to those customers, there's probably a little bit of a threat of the system. It's like, well, what's my job then, correct?
Yes.
I'm
That's right.
supposed to do the synthesis. I'm the investment analyst.
Yes.
I'm the CFA. So maybe you could impart a little bit of insight on that and how you kind of traversing that
Absolutely.
hurdle or obstacle.
Yes, absolutely. Right. So notice that I've been very careful in using the word assistant. So we
Yes.
are assisting the expert. That is number one. And the reason for that is, first of all, I don't believe we're anywhere close to any system actually replacing any expert. Right. So you can replace folk, like say activities that are routine. You can replace
Hmm.
activities that are repetitive, that have a very low bar for failures. Right. So it's okay
Hmm.
if you fail, but replacing an expert with, like, none of the systems are anywhere even close to that. So that's number one thing. But the other piece is, we go after use cases that automatically pay for themselves, because there's two kinds of use cases you can go after. Right, you can go after the productivity use cases, which means you generate 10 reports today, tomorrow generate 100 reports. Right,
Right.
same quality, nothing changed, like you're just generating more of the same.
Hmm.
Right, that in my opinion is a table stakes game, and it's also something that's a bottom line kind of a conversation where everybody is going to go to that anyway. It's like
Hmm.
saying, the example I'll use is, say, 20 years ago, if you were a company that had just introduced internet, or you just introduced email, sure, you got a little bit of a boost from that and some productivity. Very quickly everybody had it. So that's not really a productivity gain anymore, it's an expected table stakes. That's really where the bottom of the line conversations go. The problem statements we go after are all top of the line, meaning you increase the pie. Right,
Hmm.
now that means that you're increasing the pie way beyond what they can do by themselves. It's not just organic growth. And once you increase the pie, then a percentage of that is really what the investment is. The ROI conversation becomes much easier. That's number one. Second thing is, what we are seeing is exactly what happened in the world of radiology. Right, for example, in even like 10 years ago, when deep learning with images first came out, the prediction was that radiologists will all go out of business. Actually, the inverse happened. The number of radiologists jobs went up, not down. That's because instead of scanning 10 images, now you can scan 1,000 images. Now after scanning all of that, you still need a radiologist to finally put a stamp on it. So the number of patients actually being scanned went up, so the patient quality went up, like the care quality went up. Of course, the demand for radiologists went up. It's really Jeevan's law in action. In terms of something becoming cheaper, you actually have the demand go through the roof.
Yeah.
So here in analyst world, that's exactly what we're seeing, because what we give the analyst is not, we will do the same report that you write. It is about saying that your report will now be 10, 20, 30 times deeper.
Right.
We are not even saying we'll save you time. We're saying it'll take you still the same amount of time, because you have to do a lot more analysis, and the analysis results have to be understood. However, before you're just guessing, now you can predict, you can do
Got it.
simulations. That's
Right.
really where the game is changing quite a bit for us. Right.
Amazing.
And the other
Amazing.
thing that helps us is really partners like AWS, where the amount of capabilities that have been given to enterprises to start these experiments, right? So it's so much that the bar for starting experiments is close to zero. Everybody's experimenting, everybody's trying something out. They all get to some stage where they can get to maybe 60, 70, 80% of the way. And then they kind of are already hooked. They're like, okay, we want this. Now take this to production.
Got it.
Very rarely we come across these days where somebody says, no, I don't want this. They say they want it faster, they want it deeper, they want it at higher scale. Sometimes they say they want it at lower cost. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Understood. Understood. Well, thanks for that context and that color and the insights around how you're overcoming, I think, a broad market right trend on some of the obstacles, and which is the human element, right, of
Yes.
change and how their workflow might change. But also, I think the statistic that we're hearing right from Gartner that's espoused right is the idea that we fail in AI projects more often than not, right?
Yeah,
Upwards of 90+%.
that's right.
It sounds like you're unique relative to that survey, certainly, in that you're finding a lot of success. I think one
So
question I wanted to
yeah,
ask there, Arun, is what is it about how you go about? Maybe you can give us a little bit of secret sauce of
ah,
how are you going about ensuring you don't fall into that 5 or
yes,
10%, right? Or sorry, 90 to 95% of failures,
perfect.
and you fall into the 5 to 10% of
Yes.
successes.
So I have two things, right? So first of all, the metric about the 90% or 95% failure, as bad as it sounds, think of 90% of data engineering projects, not even just AI, just data engineering projects in the last decade
Hmm.
actually failing to meet the goals of the project when they started. Right. So this is after a decade of the technology maturing, the teams maturing, change management going through, all of that happening. So the 90% for a technology that is a few years old is really not that high a number. So that's one
Yeah,
side of the story. But the second side is the reason why a lot of those projects fail to get to production is they're not thinking about production on day one. And our secret sauce really is, as strange as it's going to sound, we don't do POCs. We only do production pilots. And when a customer says they don't really have the scale or the complexity required to do a production scale pilot, we say no problem. Finish your POC experiments on your own. The reason for that is today's world, anybody can do a POC or like a proof of value or a concept with 10 documents or 100 documents.
right,
No matter how complicated the documents are, you can get it done. But going from 100 documents to tens of thousands of documents is a nonlinear problem. And we start with at least tens of thousands of documents, right? So our starting point is to say, look, if you don't have, say, a few billion tokens, it's not something that you're going to see value to go to scale with, right? And if you're saying that you will never have that many like data sets to go after, then perhaps you're not thinking about the problems deep enough, right?
right,
So because if you don't have that, then the next step is you won't get the business value required to justify the investment.
yeah,
And so that's really been a godsend for us because we've said no to so many players. That's on one side. Of course, we have a SaaS version where if the customer wants to try their own thing, no problem, that we can make available. It's just that we wouldn't go into an enterprise, do all of the deployment just for a small POC. That's number one. The second thing is the production pilot aspect has a technology aspect, but it also has a change management aspect, right? Which is how make sure that you clear all of the security bars. Make sure that you actually clear the security questionnaire from the IT team and the security team before you deploy, because otherwise you will show that you can do it and then be blocked for 6 months, and in the
right,
6 months you lose all the business value,
yeah,
right? So those two are important. And the third one is we actually work directly with the business owner for the most part, who has a metric that is tied to their goal that they have to deliver a business metric. So there's no ambiguity about are we delivering that value or not. If there is ambiguity, then it's a question of okay, it's a cool science project or it's a cool technology project, but then it'll never go to production because it requires the next part.
yeah.
So that those are three things I would say, not really that much of a secret sauce to be honest, but it takes discipline to stick to it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, I would say to you that the power of no is
Yes.
something that I think is
That's
resonates really well, and I think if I think of some of the a lot of early stage companies out there, it's hard, right,
very
to
hard.
say no.
Very hard because I
Um,
mean, like you're dying for customers. You're like making sure that you have to be customer obsessed. And what I found in general is if you are transparent to the customer as to why you are saying no, and you're also giving them the option to go do something else somewhere else, they actually appreciate it. It actually earns trust with the customers.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's amazing, Arun, that like you said, seemingly sounds simple, but being
Yeah,
disciplined about it really
yeah,
is the key.
yeah.
And you will, I think what you've highlighted there is eventually, through some of that discipline and through that discipline, you'll kind of find your customers, right? The ones that make the most sense for you, the ones that are the right
Yes,
fit, the right match,
totally.
and kind
Yes,
of stay with it. And what's brilliant though is you're also helping these customers in some ways through your experience and sharing your experience
yes.
very much helping them understand that these are going to be the obstacles, right? Like you
That's right.
mentioned, security and others.
Yes,
helping them sort of predict, just like the product, right, helps
absolutely.
predict and provide that sort of type of service. You're also helping them predict what those obstacles might be.
Yeah.
So
In
that's
fact,
fantastic.
the other way to answer your question is customer come to us for three main things, right? So first one is of course security, because we run entirely inside the customer security perimeter. There is a contractual obligation that we don't learn anything from your data. So not even logs come back to us. So there's a very clean line. But then
Mhm.
in addition to that, the main reason people come to us is because of accuracy. So specificity and accuracy in an enterprise setting is very, very important. That's the first reason people come to us. Second one is scale. So when you get to, like, say, thousands of documents, when you think of the proverbial knowledge graph becoming millions of nodes, that's where we start.
Yeah.
And that becomes the second big bottleneck for them. Cost of ownership, total cost of ownership, is after we clear these three bars. Like, typically people don't come to us just for cost, but at the same time, understanding that at scale you need to be very careful about your total cost of ownership is something that we do very, very carefully.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, love how you're bulletproofing this in some regard, right? For the customer, but
Yes.
also equally, creating a really nice, healthy value exchange between
Yes.
yourselves and the end customer.
Yes.
So that's really brilliant. Want to shift gears a little bit and start to talk about your relationship with AWS. You mentioned, right,
Yes.
that
Yes.
many of you are former AWSers,
That's
so I'm sure there's a strong affinity there. I
that's right.
just kind of wanted to help the viewers understand how you're leveraging the AWS services to power the platform, as well as the broader sort of marketplace and ecosystem.
Got it. Absolutely, right. So, I mean, I'm not just saying this. We are proud to be born in AWS, both from the company perspective. We do a significant portion of our development on AWS, but many of us got our experience scaling at planetary scale at AWS, right? So that's something that we definitely are grateful about. But the reason why AWS is so, say, natural for us is we do everything at scale. So for us, running, like, even forget AI, running hundreds or thousands of Kubernetes clusters at scale is something we don't even think twice. Like, we'll just go run it. We know that things will run. Those are things that actually got us scaling, right? Same things hold if we have to go run, say, a sudden model training exercise, and we've been in those conversations many times where we need a few thousand GPUs on a drop of a coin. We can do that, right? And we know that the teams behind it, whether it's the SageMaker team or the Hyperpod team, like, they gave us early access before even some of the features were launched, and made sure that it was almost a co-development exercise. We rarely feel like it's a customer and a vendor relationship. It's really around saying, look, we want to make sure that whatever you're doing, it helps you, and also it scales. So that is important. And there are certain aspects that are very important for us. Like, so we have a very small research team from the perspective of how much work is on us. So we would much rather not go use those resources in managing our clusters versus actually running on the clusters, right?
Yeah.
As much as we know how to manage it, it's really not the most valuable thing we should be doing, right? And that's really where we see the most help, because if something goes down, we just pick up the phone. And many times it's the teams that are going to tell us that, hey, something is potentially going to go down, let's come help you with that, right? That actually helps us quite a bit. And we do both heavy duty training and heavy duty inference, meaning we
Mhm.
are doing billions of inferences on a regular basis, like on almost a daily basis. And at that kind of scale, everything breaks. Right.
Yeah.
So you need to have a support team that actually knows how to manage that kind of scale. It doesn't matter how well you architect it from an engineering standpoint, things will break. So you
Yeah.
need to be resilient, not be like fail safe, right? So that's really what we love about working with AWS teams.
Awesome.
Yes.
Well, one of the things that I was hoping we could do, and I know you mentioned quite a bit around the customers and how you're helping them, if you could just share with the viewers here kind of one standout story that really encompasses both the relationship side of things, right? How sort of the story, everything is about people often,
Yes.
right? Of how you got
Yes.
started,
Yes.
but also the how you deployed and delivered value at scale, as you mentioned, because you do work at massive scale. I
Yes.
think that'd be really insightful for the viewers here.
Absolutely. So without taking the customer's name just to protect their privacy, but then this was a large customer who was actually on a different cloud, right? That's their primary cloud. And They ended up like signing a contract with us for us to be their Gen AI provider. So their large data sets, we are the Gen AI engine, and then they're building their applications on top. The applications already existed. The applications are actually running in a different cloud. But we detected that the fastest way to actually get them to production is to make sure that we run on AWS. And their data sets actually were not in any one cloud, they were actually diversified. So we worked with the AWS teams, and in fact, the partner teams in AWS and the actual service teams
Mhm.
came together, worked with the other ISVs that had their data sets, helped us make sure that all of those things had come together very quickly, had our engines running. Because without that kind of support, we would have spent a lot of time trying to make sure that all those connectors existed, all of those pieces came together. And even though I came from AWS, just the scale of AWS became very evident at that point in time, because all we had to do was just point people and we could activate the scale. And once that happened, they went to production like a week before what was originally planned, close to unheard of in most of those production environments. Partly because we had planned that all these partners would take time to actually get on board, and then we'll actually have to connect that back together. But we were like very pleasantly surprised going in and scaling that. The reason I want to use that example is technically that may not have been the most complex use case we deployed, but from a change management and a people perspective, that was by far the most complex,
Yeah.
right? And just imagine the preferred cloud is something else, the data is all over the place, and you're getting them onto a new cloud,
Yeah.
right? It's a fairly complicated people environment, and we were able to pull it off thanks to the partnership we have with AWS, but also the scale of AWS, right?
Yeah.
Very few people quite understand that deeply. And the AWS reach, whether we call them in Japan, or we call them in Latin America, or in say Virginia, the
Yeah.
scale becomes very, very evident.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that story, Arun. And all the stories have been incredible. I think for the viewers and the organizations that are watching right now, how can they get started?
So today, right? So most of the viewers who are in enterprises or in startups, small, medium businesses, doesn't matter. My guess is they're already experimenting with something, right? But what I mean by getting started is, if you have not done even one project at scale, right? And the scale can be what you define as scale, right? So if you have been doing, like, say, something with 100 documents, then 10,000 documents is scale for you. But if you already are playing with a few thousand documents, or a database with, say, a few billion records, try to push it to the next level of scale, just one order of magnitude level of scale. You would see many things that you took for granted as working break.
Yeah.
And the reason why it's a fascinating exercise to do is, the value that you're trying to unlock most likely is not even one order of magnitude away, it's two orders of magnitude away, right? And so
Right.
that's the shock that everybody gets, because they've done their due diligence, they've done their testing. Now they're like, okay, fine, now let me go do business value. Things break because you haven't done the next level of scaling or the next level of scaling. And typically that's an order of magnitude higher. It's not a let me do 2x 3x, you need to do 10x,
Yeah.
and then see what happens. And the how to get started really is two things, right? What I would leave people with is, we used to live in a software world of build versus buy, that everybody had to make a decision of, am I going to build this or am I going to buy this? I think in the Gen AI world, there is no build versus buy. There is build versus build faster.
Mhm.
There's no like, why would anybody not build in this world, right? That's one
Right.
thing. But then why would anybody build everything in this world? You have so many tools out there for you, so many applications and partners out there. I'm not saying use Articulate, use any partner out there who actually gets you scale. You can do the next level, the 10x more, with the more or less the same resources that you would have spent anyway, but much faster,
Yeah.
right? And the build faster is really what I'm trying to expound. And it's not necessarily just a self-serving use case. It's really about, the time is now, the technology is finally there, you should be able to move faster,
Got it.
right?
Well, thank you, Arun,
Yeah.
for sharing all of your insights today. And thank you to our viewers for joining us on This Is My Offer. We'll see you next time with more stories from our amazing AWS partners.